Hello, my name is Nick Zuccarello, and today we're going to be taking a look at a video for why should you learn ZBrush. So let's go ahead and get into this and let's take a look at all the great reasons why you'd want to learn this program. So why learn ZBrush? Why should you learn this program? Where is ZBrush used? ZBrush is actually used in a lot of different industries. If you take a look at the film industry, the games industry, jewelry, collectibles, toys, medical, scientific, fine art, and illustration, we're going to take a look at all these different industries that it's used at. So something that I know that ZBrush puts out every single year is called the ZBrush Summit, where they've got some of the top talented people from different companies come in and give presentations. Some of these slides are going to come directly from the ZBrush Summit talks. So you can see Disney is a company that's used ZBrush in their production pipeline process. And this presentation was given by Zack Petroc, and he's a really excellent ZBrush user. The interesting thing about Zack Petroc is what I kind of learned about him was he's really adept at being able to do high quality human anatomy. And it was kind of interesting to see him give a talk about working at Disney where he's doing these very highly simplified shapes for these characters for Wreck-It Ralph. But it was definitely part of their production pipeline and them figuring out the designs and figuring out how they're going to use sculpture and shapes as the basis for the different characters that they're producing on the film. So you can see here some different concept sculpts that they made, and then these can actually be signed off by art directors and then passed along through the entire production pipeline where actual good geometry is set up and good topology is made so you can animate these characters instead of just having these one-off kind of static sculpts that you see here. So again, Zack Petroc was an artist that I knew quite a bit about from the past, just a big follower of his, just because of his great use of anatomy. And like I said, it was quite interesting to see how his style translated and changed from what I originally knew him as an artist into what needed to be done for the work that he did at Disney. So that just shows the power and the versatility of not only him as an artist, but then also this program where it can be used for highly detailed, intricate anatomical models and all the way to something that's more simplified and cartoony kind of shapes for what they're doing in the films for Wreck-It Ralph. Another artist that I really like and have followed over the years is Kris Costa, and he is currently working at Industrial Light and Magic, and you can see here's some different slides of his work that he's worked on, and he's done some very, again, this is somebody that's done very highly realistic anatomical type of sculpts, and he could do, you can see we've got here for the movie Rango, we've got more stylized kind of creatures or characters, and then maybe something for like the Avengers movie, you've got something that's incredibly highly detailed and realistic for like what you see in the Hulk model. Another ZBrush artist that I really enjoy and really love. At the time of making this presentation, he was working as an artist with ILM, but I believe right now he's actually an art director with Oculus, and I'm a big fan of his work because of the anatomical work that he does and incorporates that into really interesting and believable creatures and characters. Joseph Drust, at the time of making this presentation, he was an artist at Ubisoft, and he actually works for Pixelogic now. So if you go and you take a look at any of the latest Pixelogic content and some of the learning content, his face and voice is going to be on a lot of their material that they have. He's just a really an amazing artist, well versatile in a lot of different kind of fields, a lot of different shapes, so you can see he can do these crazy highly intricate and detailed characters, but I've also seen him like making really cool kind of hard surface things, so he's just an interesting artist and really uses the tool set to push the art form in a lot of different directions, so check him out for sure. ZBrush is obviously used for games, and that you can see with Epic Games and this artist here, Mike Kime, He's another really amazing character artist, and you can see the kind of work that he does where he's doing highly detailed characters, but you can see with these characters, there's not even a whole lot of skin showing just because there's so much clothing and gear and everything else like that. So another amazing artist to kind of check out. The thing that I wanted to kind of highlight with ZBrush Central, there's a lot of really great and interesting work that happens if you go to ZBrush Central, and if you go to their top row, they've always highlighting really great artists and projects. And again, what I was talking about with the ZBrush Summit, they'll highlight some of the different talks and things like that that have happened at the ZBrush Summits. So go take a look at their top row, and you can see a wide range of artists from a lot of different industries, a lot of different places, like just what we're going to be taking a look at here, from jewelry design to collectibles to games and movies. This is another artist that I'm really admire this artist's work. Yosuke Ishikawa. Probably just butchered that name, but the thing that I really like about this artist is he's working not only with ZBrush to do highly detailed sculpts, but he does amazing material and texture work, and this is all pushed in a real-time kind of environment. So if you find his work on YouTube, you're going to find a lot of really cool fan art that he's done, but it's just really amazing the detail that this artist is pushing for their work. And I like creatures and monsters and things like that, so a lot of his work is definitely very creepy, kind of very interesting in that kind of regards, but a little bit spooky too. But a really great artist to kind of check out and take a look at. Always doing very interesting work. When I first started taking a look at this artist, he was doing a lot of work in the Unreal Engine, and I think a lot of his work is translated over into the Marmoset engine. So if you find his work, and you could find him on ArtStation potentially, you would be able to see the actual models and just spin them around and take a look at them directly inside the Marmoset viewer. Another artist that I'm really love is Rafael Grassetti, and he's currently, I believe, an art director for Sony Santa Monica and the God of War franchise, and he's probably well known for Kratos, that model, and making that. But you can see here in the bottom right, he's made some work for McFarlane Collectables. This is actually an artist friend of mine, Dave Wilkins, comic book artist, and this is, I guess, one of his designs in a collaboration that they made for a collectible. So I thought that was a really interesting and cool kind of model there. So he does amazing human sculpts, creature sculpts, has done a lot of work with 3D printing lately, and painting with airbrush and stuff like that. So he's actually started a new kind of series in his YouTube channel where he's interviewing a lot of different artists. So definitely look him up and check him out. His work is amazing, top-notch work. It's probably, as far as I'm concerned, and the kind of work that I like to look at, he's probably the #1 artist that I really love his style, and how much information he's sharing, and kind of what he's doing to push himself as an artist in the art form. And you can see these are some 3D prints that was done by a company called Ownage, and just some amazing prints. And if you want to find Ownage, if you look at the bottom of this slide down here, you can see that there's this thread on ZBrush Central called 3D Prints Cheap, Good Free Prints Game is on. Free Print Game is on P.3. I don't know. Just take a look for that. I'm not sure if you're going to really want to look them up and use them as a service. I know that they're not going to be cheap. They do some of the best quality collectible prints that I've seen. So it's not necessarily about the quality of the work. It's just if you want to spend that kind of cash, I don't think it's cheap to get work done by them, and I would expect that it would cost because of the quality level that you're going to get back in return. But these are some of the places that you can kind of look up that work and take a look at them. I also have on my Pinterest, if you go to pinterest.com Zook 3D prints and you go and take a look there, I've got a Pinterest board that has a lot of different work that I've been penning for 3D prints and collectibles and stuff like that. So there's a lot of really cool and interesting work to take a look at there. This was talking about 3D printing. There was a 3D Printing World Expo, and I was kind of highlighting some work here. Dominic Qwek, he's a really cool and interesting ZBrush artist. He actually works for Blizzard Entertainment, I believe, and he's been doing a lot of his own custom designs and getting 3D prints and turning those into model kits that people are purchasing and can purchase their work. Here I wanted to highlight Legacy Effects. If you think about the movie Pacific Rim and you think about some of the highly detailed costumes that they made for that, you start to get an idea of what this company is about. And so I just kind of wanted to play this video and highlight some of the work that they were doing.
Legacy Effects creates practical effects for hundreds of movies and commercials annually, from creature design to prosthetic makeup to animatronics to specialty suits. Our approach incorporates the latest in 3D printing technology with a deep pool of artistic talent. The founding partners at Legacy Effects supervised projects at Stan Winston Studios for 25 years. It was there nearly a decade ago that 3D printing really started to emerge in the special effects workflow.
Back at Stan Winston's studio, the design department was basically working on more visual effects rather than practical effects. So we started playing with different technologies to work hand in hand more with the traditional physical effects that Stan Winston was producing. Fabrication department, the mechanical department, the electronics department, mold making department, and the model shop. We needed to bring design in to contribute. Around 2006, Alan Scott was approached to do all the miniatures for this Halo diorama campaign.
Halo diorama was extremely ambitious. We ended up creating 700 figurines, about 7 inches tall, that depicted a massive battle. A huge motion control camera went over a stage that was 70 feet long by 30 feet wide. You had vignettes and scenarios, explosions, shots of agony and people getting killed, hundreds of different poses. That meant that we had to create things really, really quickly.
We utilized the artists that were still in that design room, taking the game assets and converting them into stereolithography files that we could send to a service bureau to actually produce physical parts.
Using 3D modeling, we would grow some just to be molded. We would break them apart with arms and legs and heads, put it on a body and get a variety of different poses out of that one part. There were some that were so specific, we scanned a whole battery of actors in different expressions, then grew their faces, and then we would populate them on different figurines.
It was a perfect testing platform because in the delivery and the amount of characters that needed to be done, traditional sculpting would never have worked just within the deadline.
This tool allowed us to do that job.
When we got into projects like Iron Man, we did a variety of maquettes through 3D printing, additive manufacturing, in acrylics or whichever materials that were being offered up at the time. That was so successful, just growing those maquettes, that I ran some numbers and tried to figure out, well, maybe we could utilize this process in growing the full Iron Man. The numbers worked out, and that was kind of the first one we kicked off as a full-size piece that we did completely rapid prototyping. At that time, we were the first people to do that type of work. It worked out great. We were all really excited about it. Stan was very excited about seeing this process taking the next step.
After the untimely passing of Stan Winston in 2008, we formed Legacy Effects, and we were still in the middle of Avatar, and we had been beta testing new sculpting programs and starting to think, boy, it sure would be great if we had this printer in-house.
We brought in an Objet Eaton 260V, which we still use to this day, almost 24/7. In the morning I could print you a rigid part. After lunch I could maybe switch and print you a small clear part, and then back by 5 o'clock I could print you a rubber part, all by pushing a button and changing out materials. That's killer for this studio.
You want fluidity. Yeah, and that's what this whole business is based on.
In a feature film now, you'll have 4 months if you're lucky.
We do a tremendous amount of commercial work here, and you have, it could be days, it could be 3 weeks. 6 weeks is luxurious.
That time frame is so shortened that you need to move from the design into actual pieces really quickly.
When you do a design for a character, it ultimately has to be brought into the real world. If you've already had the illustration approved, traditionally you would then have to do either a maquette or a study, and then you'd have that approved before you move into the full-size piece.
A lot of stuff used to be modeled in clay. The iterations would take several days. Now we can basically submit something, have it changed by the end of the day.
Concept design is no longer just pencil rendering. Concept design is a 3D model. The production, the directors, everyone's seen it in a turntable, so they know exactly what it looks like. They've approved it. All we have to say is, like, how big do you want it? It's all the same at that point.
We complete a whole movie now with multiple, say, Iron Man suits or RoboCop suits, or 26 robots in real steel in the same amount of time that we spent hand sculpting the first Terminator.
If you have the time, sure, sculpt, in clay. If you don't have the time, digital sculpting is really the only method that you have to be able to get something of any quality and detail out.
When you sculpt something where you have hard-edged designs that need to be perfect, really lends itself well to sculpting digitally, then rapid prototyping that out. What this process of rapid prototyping with digital design has allowed us to do is the engineering, the joints and mechanisms, that's put in simultaneously with the design. It's efficient because you can pre-check and see, well, is that joint going to crash when that forearm moves?
3D printing offers something that traditional approaches didn't have a solution for. Our lead sculptors embrace that kind of technology, and they use their artistic skills with a different tool set.
Once you take a practical approach to your digital sculpture, you start to find there are more similarities than not. Today, there really isn't any difference other than the tactile part of it.
Basically, you get the raw sculpture handed to you. It still requires the same finesse and the same artistic skills with model makers and artists to take it to a finished level. In the business that we're in, we're always going to need duplicates. We're going to need a soft version. We're going to need a stunt version. So if we're going to do 150 suits of armor, we're going to print one, going to make it really nice, do all our artwork to it, then we're going to mold it. And then you can control the material that we're running it in and how many that we need.
We're at the starting point for this asset that's going to be final for physical and the visual effects portions of the film.
When you're working digitally, you really don't have a sense of true perspective. One of the things that we like to do a lot is we'll make maquettes of the suit or a character that we're making, and they use that as on-set reference for lighting and texturing and whatnot. That reference is propagated to visual effects to overall make a much better product in the end.
Our whole industry, from when it began with Dick Smith back in his lab, is an industry founded on stealing and borrowing other techniques and other processes from other industries and applying them to this industry. When we needed to make fake teeth for Interview with the Vampire, we went to dentists, like what materials do you use? And fake eyes, we went to oculars. What kind of resin? What do you use? We looked at prosthesis. And the same thing with fake skins. We went to the medical industry. We grow together when we share information.
We work with people that work in aerospace, that work in sports, that work in medical. We even have access to people that are R&Ding different materials and where material research is going.
We have to come up with solutions in days, and most industry moves slower.
There are a lot of things that we do here at Legacy that's a tremendous amount of knowledge to someone that's on the outside.
It's kind of like open source. Everyone gets to learn from everyone else's successes and failures.
It's fantastic, I think. It's just like, what could the ceiling be on this? We haven't seen it yet.
Okay, I know that was a long video, but I definitely think it was well worth checking out, and it highlights a lot of different industries kind of coming together to make a final product, especially in the film world. So it was really exciting to see that. The thing that I wanted to point out is that there's been this advancement in 3D printers that are affordable for people at home. At the time of this, Formlabs was coming out with their Formlabs 1, and now they have the 2 and the 3. Prices are still pretty high for that, but there's been also resin printers that have come out recently. AnyQubic Photon is an example of one. The Elegoo Mars is another one that is highly reasonable, somewhere in the $300 range that you could get a hold of. Resin's about $50 for a bottle, and maybe you could print about 6 to 10 small models, depending on what the how intricate the design is and things like that. So there's a lot of really cool possibilities with digital sculpture and 3D printing, even in your home now. So if you wanted to get into jewelry design, that's another avenue that is kind of really taking shape with digital sculpting, and ZBrush has been pretty central in making these highly intricate and detailed parts in that industry. So here's an artist. You can see T.S. Wittelsbach. You could take a look at this artist's work and look him up. And again, there's a lot of really cool and interesting work that's being done with ZBrush and with the advent of these 3D printers. And some of these printers, especially for jewelry design, they don't print very large shapes, but they're super, super highly detailed. And that's exactly what would be needed for jewelry design. Now these are cast in a particular way and then filled with metal, so it's a completely different process. But again, it starts off, and ZBrush is part of that process now. There's also in the scientific and medical world just using ZBrush as an illustration tool. So nothing's really super new about using 3D in the illustration process, but ZBrush has just become another tool that can be used to do highly detailed models, and especially for things for anatomical structures and things like that. It's a perfect tool for doing stuff like that. Also for scientific, medical, if you take a look at some stuff for the Discovery Channel and things that they've made for different creatures and dinosaurs and prehistoric animals for documentaries, ZBrush has been used for that world as well. And then if we start to take a look at the fine art world, this is somebody that I know from looking at some of the art history classes that I had, and this artist Eric van Straaten is an artist that was using a type of 3D printer that could print directly with color information. So I don't know how much post-processing was done to these models, but the artist definitely developed this art digitally and then printed it in color as well. Speaking of illustration, Pascal Blanche is an artist, a French artist, and I believe he's an art director for Ubisoft. And I've always been a really big fan of his work, but he's uses a wide range of digital tools, but ZBrush is part of the process. And you can see he's definitely well known for his illustration style that he has. So from what I've seen from his process, these models might not look all that spectacular from the backside or whatever. He's mainly focused on making these really bright colors and these color combinations and doing really cool and interesting shapes in combination with each other and using it as an illustration tool. For the world of concept art for film and games, Ben Mauro is a artist that I think that you should take a look at his work and see how he's used ZBrush and incorporated that into his concept art painting process for doing designs for film and games. And here's some more of his work that you can see. Bryan Wynia is an artist that I believe he was working at Sony Santa Monica at one point. He was working at id Software at another point. I think he's possibly still there right now, but he's another artist that was doing these really cool ZBrush sculpts, but then taking it into Photoshop and painting over the top of the and using it as a concept tool to push design that can get approved by art directors. And here's some more examples of his work, and you can see that he did some work for the game God of War. Scott Eaton is somebody that I would like to draw to your attention. So in the world of anatomy, especially for digital anatomy sculptors, this artist is probably one of the premier and top artists that does a lot of work with his own classes online. So you can take a look and find his work there, and you could actually take some of his coursework if you wanted, if you really want to learn anatomy. And if you want to be a creature character artist, I would highly recommend this artist. But he also goes to some of the top companies out there for films and games, and I believe he does on-site workshops with some of these larger companies. But really love his work. Stephen Lord is an artist that works for McFarlane Toys. So McFarlane Toys is a pretty big user of the digital process and using ZBrush for their collectibles market, but then also for their different various toy lines. And he's another artist that I highly recommend checking out. Alejandro Pereira is somebody that works in the collectibles industry, and you can see some of the different work. I think it's really interesting and well worth taking a look. Adam Ross is another person in the collectibles market that I think is does exceptional great work, and I think you'd want to take a look at that artist. And so looking forward, when I first saw ZBrush, I knew that that was a program that I had to learn. Now, depending on what industry that you want to go into, it would be beneficial for you to probably start looking into 3D printing as well, and then start to understand how the digital world translates into the physical world. I think if you could take a look at that program and those processes, it could open up the possibilities for you and what you could do for a career, and it could jumpstart something that would be really beneficial for you for this journey for why you'd want to learn this program.